It always starts like this, in silence. No one notices the exact moment when a child stops being a child. It's almost invisible, like a light that gradually fades, a look that learns the weight of the world too soon, a small body that feels that if it doesn't hold everything together, everything will fall apart. Sometimes it's the father's addiction. Sometimes it's the mother's distant gaze. Sometimes it's just the silence, the kind of silence that screams inside the house. And there, in that instant, something reorganizes itself inside the child's brain. If I don't take care of it, no one will. It's the first promise a soul makes to fear. And the scariest thing is that it keeps it. From then on, the smile becomes armor. Tears are swallowed before they are born. Spontaneity gives way to strategy. That child who should be playing begins to observe. They learn to read facial expressions as if they were secret codes. They know when the mood is going to change even before anyone speaks. They live in a state of alert, trying to avoid storms that are not theirs. And the world applauds. How mature you are, so responsible, so strong. But no one asks about the price of this. Because behind this precocious strength lies a silent loneliness. The kind of loneliness that comes not from the absence of people, but from the absence of protection. This is where the first type of destruction is born. Not the kind that screams, but the kind that shapes in silence. Because growing up with the weight of holding an adult is like trying to swim with rocks tied to your ankles. On the outside, you seem to be surviving, but on the inside, you are slowly drowning. There are those who go through life without realizing they have lived this way. People who smile, work, love, and deep down continue to carry that same tired, observant 7-year-old child, trying to understand what they did wrong to deserve such a heavy burden. And the cruelest part? It's that, for this child, love is mixed with duty. She learns that being loved means being useful, that peace is something that needs to be earned, never received. So she tries hard. She becomes the one who calms, the one who understands, the one who never complains, the one who fixes what isn't broken. This child grows up and the world calls her strong, but she knows her strength was born out of fear. Fear of losing what little love remained, fear of being another burden, fear that if she relaxes, everything will fall apart again. And so, love ceases to be a refuge and becomes a task. Calmness begins to seem dangerous. Joy becomes something that must be earned. It's curious how the body remembers what the mind tries to forget. Decades later, that child, now dressed as an adult, still feels their heart race when someone raises their voice. They still feel guilty for resting. They still try to solve everyone else's problems before looking at themselves. But no one sees it. No one imagines that behind efficiency there is exhaustion, that behind self-control there is panic, that behind independence there is a deep fear of needing someone and being disappointed again. This is how trauma disguises itself as virtue. This is how the wound becomes a resume. This is how destruction masks itself as success. And suddenly, praise becomes a prison. Because every "you're so strong" is a reminder that you can't break down. Every "you're so mature" is a reminder that there's no room to be vulnerable. Every "you can handle anything" is a silent push to carry on alone. But how long can a soul bear to be its own fortress? How long can a heart maintain control before imploding from within? There is something tragic and beautiful about seeing someone who has learned to live without depending on anyone else. Tragic, because it means that one day they needed help, and no one came. Beautiful, because even though they were hurt, they chose to survive. They chose not to repeat the pain. They chose to become what was missing. But that choice comes at a price. The price is never feeling truly at home anywhere. It is having friends and still feeling alone. It is having love and still doubting that you deserve it. It is going to sleep tired and waking up tired again, because true rest requires trust, and trust is something they never learned to feel. Some people call it resilient, others call it independence, but deep down, it's just a way to stay alive in a world that taught him too early that dependence is dangerous. And there's something almost poetic about it. The broken child who decides never to need anyone again. It's a form of silent revenge against the past, an internal pact. I will never be hurt again. But what happens when the same wall that protects you also imprisons you? When the same wall that saved you prevents you from feeling? This is the contradiction that lives in the heart of those who survived too early. The desire to be free, and the fear of what might happen if they let their guard down. And maybe you know someone like that. Someone who seems to have everything under control, but avoids prolonged eye contact, who helps everyone, but never asks for help, who talks little about themselves and laughs too quickly, who always has a ready answer, but rarely a sincere pause. They are the survivors of affection, people who have learned to love with fear, to smile with caution, to give of themselves with invisible limits, people who have learned that dependence is synonymous with danger, and inside them, hidden under layers of competence and self-control, there is a child frozen in time, staring at the door, and wondering why no one came in that day. That question was never answered, but it shaped everything that came after. And now, as an adult, you find yourself repeating patterns you don't even understand. You find yourself trying to save people who remind you of someone. You find yourself exhausted but unable to stop. You find yourself surrounded but missing something you can't name. Is it really freedom when independence becomes an invisible prison? Is it really strength when control costs you your own peace? This is the wound that doesn't bleed, but shapes destinies. It is the emotional scar of those who were destroyed too soon, and who, for fear of depending on others, ended up distancing themselves from what they needed most: human contact. The world applauds strength, but ignores what created it. No one sees the exhaustion behind the impeccable posture. No one hears the cry that exists between one laugh and another. No one realizes how lonely it is to be too strong. And it is in this silence that many lose themselves, trying to prove that they are fine, that they are self-sufficient, that they don't need anything, trying to erase the past by being the opposite of it. But the past does not disappear when it is denied. It just changes form, and what was once fear of abandonment becomes a need for control. What was once a lack of affection becomes a search for recognition. What was once pain becomes performance, and the world calls this success. But inside, the soul knows something there continues to beg for rest, because no one is born cold, no one is born immune. Every independent adult was once a child who needed too much, and found no one. It is this absence that drives us, that builds empires, that creates goals, that fuels ambition. But it is also this absence that prevents the heart from resting. The paradox is cruel. The more you win, the more distant you feel. The stronger you become, the harder it is to trust. The further you go, the more you miss something you don't know where you lost. And maybe that's why, even at the top, so many look in the mirror and don't recognize themselves, because the price of not depending on anyone is not allowing anyone to really see you. This is the story of many, perhaps more than we imagine. People who learn to survive amid the wreckage and confused survival with life. But something begins to change when you realize that what destroyed you was not the lack of love, but the promise you made to fear. Never depend on anyone again. Because that promise, made silently by a wounded child, lives on inside the adult. And as long as it exists, peace will always be temporary. The most curious thing is that the more we try to escape dependence, the more we become prisoners of it. Only now in reverse, dependent on autonomy, addicted to control, allergic to vulnerability. But even the most resistant of hearts tires one day, and when fatigue sets in, it doesn't scream, it falls silent. And in that silence, something inside us whispers, "I don't want to be invincible, I just want to be seen." That's when the story begins to change, when strength ceases to be pride, and begins to reveal itself as defense, when independence ceases to be a shield, and begins to hurt, when "I don't need anyone" begins to sound like "I don't know how to need anymore." And it is precisely at that moment, when the armor begins to crack, that something deeply human emerges, the memory of who we were before the pain. Because no one is born promising never to trust again. No one is born swearing to be strong. This is learned, trained, reinforced, and for that very reason, it can be unlearned. But to get there, you must first look back to the beginning, to that exact moment when the child realized that love could disappear, and decided to become its substitute. And perhaps that is the question that changes everything. What happens to a soul when love becomes a task? What is left of a heart that has learned to deserve everything, except rest? The answer has not yet arrived, but it is approaching, like someone slowly returning to the place where it all began. There is a moment in life when something inside you simply asks, "Why do I always feel responsible for everything?" Sometimes that question comes up when you're cleaning the house late at night, after everyone has gone to sleep. Other times, when you're sitting in your car, in silence, after a day when no one noticed how much you held back? It's a question that seems simple, but hides a whole story, a story that began decades ago, when you were still too young to understand what was happening. When a child is forced to care for adults, something very profound reorganizes within them. Psychology calls this parentification, when roles are reversed, and the child becomes the caregiver. Sometimes it's explicit, the alcoholic father that the child needs to hide from the neighbors. Other times it's subtle, the sad mother that the child tries to cheer up with drawings and smiles. In both cases, the child learns that love is conditional on their ability to keep the other person well, and the body keeps that memory. Even after 40, 50, 60 years, the mind continues to act as if the danger were still there. You find yourself measuring the tone of conversations, avoiding conflicts, anticipating the moods of others. It's like living in an emotional minefield. A dirty look, a longer silence, and that's it. The internal alarm goes off. Your heart races, your body stiffens, and that old feeling comes back. I need to fix this before everything falls apart. Most people don't even realize they live like this. They call it manner, habit, protective instinct. But in reality, it's survival. It's the brain functioning in a mode called hypervigilance, a constant state of alertness in which the nervous system never rests. It's the same mechanism that saves a child from chaos, but silently destroys an adult. Imagine someone who, from an early age, had to always be one step ahead. That person grows up and becomes what we call reliable, efficient, tireless. It's that woman who works all day, takes care of her children, her elderly parents, and still blames herself for being tired. It's that man who never asks for help, who prides himself on never missing a day at work, even when his body is begging for a break. But what no one sees is that behind this competence lies exhaustion, that behind the "everything's fine" lies a heart that has never truly rested. Think about how many times you've found yourself saying, "If I don't do it, no one will." This phrase, which seems merely practical, is a direct echo of childhood. It's the belief that the world will collapse if you relax, that resting is dangerous, that trusting is weakness, and this shapes everything: work, relationships, even the way you feel love. Because those who learned early on that love is an exchange, that you have to give to receive, grow up thinking they have to deserve everything, including peace. How many times have you found yourself saying, "I just wanted a little peace," and when you finally have it, you feel a strange discomfort, as if calmness were suspicious, as if something were wrong with there being nothing wrong? That is the body still stuck on the battlefield of the past. The brain tries to relax, but the nervous system says, "Be careful, it's a trap." And so you get busy again. You do more, help more, get more involved. Not because you want to, but because the silence is unbearable. Because rest seems dangerous. There is a true story that illustrates this perfectly. A woman named Elisa, now 58, said that her mother suffered from severe depressive episodes when she was a child. Elisa remembered making coffee for her mother at the age of 8, sitting next to her bed trying to cheer her up, feeling that her duty was to keep her alive. Years later, as an adult, she became a nurse, the profession that best suited what she had learned, caring for others. But at 50, her body began to take its toll. Anxiety attacks, insomnia, feelings of emptiness. And the most curious thing is that, even surrounded by patients, Elisa felt alone. "I only feel alive when someone needs me," she said. This phrase sums up what trauma does. It turns love into a function. The mind is conditioned to believe that there is only value if there is usefulness, that being is less important than doing, that love is earned through effort, and is never simply received. And this belief infiltrates adult relationships. You may have experienced this, attracting emotionally needy people, trying to save them, always being the support, or the opposite, pushing away anyone who tries to care for you, because vulnerability feels like a threat. How many loves die silently like this? One wanting to be saved, the other unable to be cared for. Two adults carrying children who still unconsciously wait for the love they never received. And the curious thing is that when someone finally tries to love you for real, without you having to deserve it, something inside you is suspicious. You think, "Why does this person like me? What do they want in return?" It's trauma turning love into a contract. Even those who consider themselves strong often experience this in subtle ways. It's the executive who can't stand the idea of taking a vacation. It's the mother who feels guilty for sitting on the couch in the afternoon. It's the retiree who, even after a lifetime of effort, still feels like they didn't do enough. It's the woman who takes care of everyone but cries hidden in the bathroom because no one takes care of her. These are patterns that are not born of weakness, but of survival. Patterns that started as protection and turned into imprisonment. And the more time passes, the deeper they become, because the body ages, but the emotional system continues to operate as it did in childhood. You may be 60 years old, but when someone ignores you, your body reacts as if you were 6. When someone criticizes you, your heart races as if it were a physical threat. When silence sets in, that old need to fill the void returns. And that's where the cycle lies. The adult tries to correct in the present what they couldn't resolve in the past. Think about how many times you've been the mediator in a family fight. How many times you've tried to keep the peace, even when it cost you your own voice. How many times you've swallowed your words so as not to ruin the mood. It's always the same child, still trying to keep the house standing. But there's one detail that no one mentions. Living like this is not only emotionally exhausting, it's physiologically destructive. Constant hypervigilance keeps the body flooded with cortisol, the stress hormone. This affects sleep, the immune system, the heart, digestion. It's like leaving the engine running all the time, even when parked, and there comes a time when the body takes its toll. Chronic anxiety, unexplained pain, exhaustion that even vacations can't cure. You think you're getting old, but in reality, you're just tired of surviving. The truth is that emotional trauma doesn't disappear over time. It changes form. The child who once felt invisible becomes the adult who needs to be indispensable. The son who learned to comfort his father becomes the partner who tries to fix everyone. The girl who swallowed her tears becomes the woman who swallows her words so as not to seem difficult. And all of this seems normal until the day when your body or soul says, enough. You begin to notice small signs, your heart racing for no reason, constant tiredness, a feeling of emptiness even though your life seems to be sorted out. Sometimes, life seems too good for the sadness you feel. And that is confusing. How can I feel this way when I have everything? But the body doesn't understand achievement, it understands security. And if that security never existed, no achievement is enough. There is an old story about a boy who grew up listening to his parents fight every night. He would hide in his room and try to imagine he was invisible. As an adult, he became a judge, the perfect profession for someone who grew up mediating conflicts. But even after decades, that man confessed that he could never sleep in absolute silence. He needed a fan, any sound, because silence, for him, was the sound of danger. This is how trauma disguises itself as preference. You think you like noise, but what you're really trying to do is not feel. The mind rationalizes what the body still fears, and there is something even deeper. The difficulty of receiving. People who grew up taking care of everything feel uncomfortable when someone treats them kindly. A simple compliment becomes a source of shame. A gift arouses guilt. A gesture of love seems suspicious. You didn't have to. You shouldn't have done that. I can manage. These are automatic phrases, shields disguised as humility. What the heart really wants to say is, I don't know how to accept this without fear. Time passes, and this resistance becomes part of one's identity. You take pride in your independence, but deep down, there is an emptiness that no amount of autonomy can fill. Because what was hurt was not the adult, it was the right to be cared for. And maybe that's why, on certain nights when everything seems calm, something inside you stirs, as if a forgotten part wants to speak, a part that was never heard, only used to keep others well. This is the pain that many carry and cannot name, the pain of having been needed before being loved. But there is no guilt in that. You just did what a young mind does best, adapt so as not to lose the bond. Children sacrifice authenticity for belonging. It's a biological instinct. That's how they survive. The problem is that in adulthood, the body continues to obey the same rule. Don't be a burden, don't cause trouble, don't need anything. And that's how an entire generation grows old with a full chest and an empty heart. And maybe you realize this now, looking back on your own story. Maybe you see that you spent your life being everyone's balancing point, but never had anyone to hold your own weight. The truth is that what we call strength is often just trauma that has learned to walk upright. And the stronger you try to be, the further you get from yourself. Because strength is never falling. Strength is being able to admit how much it hurt to hold everything together on your own. And maybe that's where healing begins. Not when you finally become invincible, but when you realize you no longer need to be. When you understand that that silent pact, to never depend on anyone, was made by a child who just wanted to feel safe. But now, you are no longer that child. And there is something deeply liberating about starting to remember that. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to live in alert mode all the time? They laugh, work, take care of everything, but something in them never relaxes, as if their body had forgotten the path to peace. It's as if there is a permanent tension, an invisible thread pulling from within, reminding them, be careful, don't let your guard down, don't trust. This is the emotional legacy of those who had to grow up before their time. And it infiltrates every gesture, every choice, every love that comes and goes. The truth is that the more time passes, the more subtle this pain becomes. It camouflages itself in routine. You wake up early, work, take care of everything, help those in need. On paper, life seems in order. But inside, there is a constant noise, a feeling that something is always hanging by a thread. And the cruelest part? You don't even know what it would be like to live without it anymore. How many times have you felt that you didn't know how to rest? That even in silence, your mind kept spinning, like an engine that never turns off? Some call this anxiety. But in many cases, it's just the body repeating what it has learned. That calm comes before the storm. When someone grows up amid instability, the brain associates peace with danger. The absence of noise sounds suspicious. Tranquility is read as a trap. That's why, often, when everything seems to be fine, something inside you sabotages. It creates a problem, starts an argument, looks for a reason to worry. It's not that you want to suffer, it's that suffering has become familiar. And that's one of the most painful paradoxes of trauma. The mind wants to heal, but the body wants to repeat. Because the body seeks what it knows, even if it hurts. Have you ever wondered why you feel uncomfortable when someone shows genuine affection? Why does a simple kindness arouse suspicion? When childhood taught you that love comes with conditions, unconditional affection seems like a lie. And without realizing it, you begin to reject exactly what you always wanted to receive. Maybe that's why so many good people live emotionally alone. They are afraid of depending on others, afraid of needing others, afraid of being seen up close and having others notice their hidden exhaustion. So they become islands, beautiful, strong, admired, but alone. Now stop and think. When was the last time someone took care of you without you having to earn it? No demands, no guilt, no need to prove your worth. Maybe it's been so long that you don't even remember what that feeling is like. Comment below if you like. When was the moment in your life when you realized you had to grow up too soon? Just reflecting on this is already a step forward. Because when you name the pain, it begins to lose its power. What few people understand is that trauma isn't just in our memories. It lives in the way we react today. A simple compliment can trigger the same discomfort you felt as a child when you thought love had a price. A small mistake can trigger the old shame of not being good enough. A silly conflict can awaken the primitive fear of being abandoned. And that's how the past stays alive. Not in the facts, but in the reactions. But there is something deeper that is rarely said. Many of those who grew up too strong are now afraid of being happy. Because happiness, when it has never been stable, seems dangerous. It's like getting on a boat knowing that at some point it will sink. So in order not to be disappointed, you sabotage yourself first. How many times have you started something good? A relationship, a project, a change, and then, out of nowhere, given up? It wasn't laziness, it was protection. It was the voice of fear saying, if I don't have expectations, I won't be frustrated. But that voice, although it seems wise, is the same one that keeps you stuck in repetition. Because healing only begins when you allow yourself to take the risk of living differently. And perhaps that is the greatest challenge of adulthood. Learning to trust something that your body still fears. Some people reach their 50s or 60s and realize they've spent their entire lives trying to prove something that no one else is asking of them. They worked too hard, gave too much of themselves, negated themselves too much, and now, with everything they've achieved, they no longer know what to do with the silence, because the internal noise is still there. A man once told me that after he retired, he felt a terrible emptiness. He said, "It feels like if I stop, I disappear." That struck me, because it wasn't about work, It was about identity. He didn't know who he was without being useful. And that's exactly what happens when your whole life you've had to be worth something for what you do, not for who you are. Do you feel that too? That your presence only has value when you are serving someone else? That if you stop, you lose your meaning? If so, write in the comments. What do you feel you still carry from your early years? Sometimes sharing this insight helps others recognize themselves too. And there is an important detail. Trauma does not only manifest itself in suffering. Sometimes it disguises itself as success. People admire you, respect you, call you an example, and you know that inside, something is broken. It is as if recognition were makeup that covers but does not heal. That's why often, those who seem strongest are the ones who need help the most. Those who offer the most comfort are the ones who cry the most alone. Those who talk the most about love are the ones who are afraid to feel it fully. Have you noticed how easy it is to forgive others, but almost impossible to forgive yourself? It's because, deep down, there's still a part of you that believes you failed. That if you had been better, calmer, more obedient, maybe everything would have been different. But you were just a child, and no child should carry the guilt of trying to survive. That's why healing doesn't begin when you understand the past. It begins when you embrace it. When you stop trying to be what others expected and start asking yourself, what do I really want now? And sometimes, that answer comes in small gestures. Stop apologizing for resting. Say no without feeling guilty. Ask for help without shame. These are simple acts, but for those who have spent their entire lives being strong, they are revolutions. You know what's curious? The world in 2025 talks a lot about self-care, therapy, mental health, but there are still millions of people who confuse self-care with selfishness, who think that resting is laziness, that saying no is a lack of love, that taking care of yourself is distancing yourself from others, when, in fact, it's the opposite. Taking care of yourself is the only way to remain whole, so you can truly love. Maybe you've spent your life trying to be everyone's pillar, but every pillar cracks one day. And when it cracks, what does it support? This question is important, because the answer is never others. It's you. It's the part of you that never had space, but is still there, waiting to be heard. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine that version of yourself that had to grow up too soon. How would they feel if you finally said, "Now it's my turn. Now I'll take care of you"? It may seem silly, but it changes everything, because the brain doesn't understand time. It understands present. And every time you embrace your own needs, it's like saying to the past, "You survived, and now you can rest." You don't need to fix yourself. You just need to allow yourself to feel what you never could. The problem is that feeling, for those who have spent their lives protecting themselves, is scary. It's like opening the door to the dark room of childhood and seeing that there are still shadows inside. But it's also realizing that now there is enough light to face them. And perhaps the biggest surprise of this journey is discovering that you are not alone. There are thousands of people just like you, smiling on the outside, screaming on the inside. People who, for fear of depending on others, distanced themselves from what they needed most: connection. So if something in you recognized itself here, write just one word in the comments: I recognize. That simple word is already a gesture of courage, because recognizing is the first step to freeing yourself. And when that liberation begins, something incredible happens. The body slows down, the mind breathes, the heart beats again to the rhythm of life. It's not quick, nor is it easy, but it's real. Because what really destroys you is not what they did to you. It's what you keep repeating without realizing, and maybe it's time to break that cycle. To understand that the absolute independence you defend so much may just be a sophisticated form of loneliness. And there's no shame in admitting that. Shame is continuing to carry alone what was never yours to carry. You don't have to prove anything anymore. You don't have to be strong all the time anymore. You just need to be human, with all that entails: imperfection, desire, fear, love. Because perhaps the secret to true strength lies precisely in laying down your arms, in admitting that sometimes courage is about stopping resisting and starting to feel. And who knows, maybe this is the beginning of what has always been missing: not a new role, but a new way of being. Have you ever noticed how, even after years, certain pains still find their way back? All it takes is a tone of voice, a different silence, a sidelong glance, and there it is. The same feeling of being alone in the middle of everything. the same desire to hide, to control yourself, to prove that everything is fine. It's amazing. The body ages, the mind matures, but emotional pain doesn't understand time. It just waits to be heard. And maybe that's exactly why so many people reach their 50s and 60s and realize that, despite everything they've built, there's still something inside them asking for rest. The good news is that this time, there is a way back, and it doesn't involve forgetting what happened, but learning to look at the past without getting lost in it. Recent research from Harvard University has shown that adults who have learned to consciously express vulnerability are 40% less likely to develop cardiovascular disease. This is no coincidence. Keeping everything inside, always keeping quiet, controlling everything all the time, this overloads the body, the nervous system, the heart. But when you speak, feel, and accept, the body literally slows down. Emotional healing is also physical healing. There is a true story that left a mark on me. A 62-year-old man, after decades of being the provider and the strong one in the family, had such an intense anxiety attack that he thought he was having a heart attack. When the tests showed that his heart was fine, he cried and said, "So it's my soul that's tired." And he was right. His body could no longer bear the weight of a silence that began when he was 8 years old, the day his father left, and he promised himself he would never depend on anyone again. How many of us have made similar promises without realizing it? I'll never cry again. I won't need anyone. I'll be strong no matter what. But now, after so long, maybe it's time to make a new promise, one that doesn't come from fear, but from awareness. One that says, I can be strong and still be human. And this is where the most important point of all comes in. Strength is not about holding on alone, but about knowing when it's time to allow yourself to feel. There is a simple but transformative practice that many psychologists call emotional reparenting, a complicated term for something very human, learning to care for the part of you that was never cared for. It works like this: when a difficult feeling arises, anger, sadness, loneliness, instead of pushing it away, imagine yourself talking to a frightened child. Ask, "What do you need right now?" Sometimes the answer will be, to rest, sometimes, to cry, sometimes, just, to be heard. And that's okay, because what heals is not erasing the pain, but offering it what it previously lacked: acceptance. Another step is what we call conscious deceleration. Trauma teaches the body to run. The healing process teaches it to stop. Every day, consciously choose 5 minutes to do nothing. No cell phone, no music, no multitasking. Just breathe. Notice how silence, which once seemed dangerous, begins to feel safe. Little by little, you re-educate your body to understand that peace is not a threat. And if you want to take it a step further, start practicing something that science calls micro-vulnerability. Small doses of emotional truth in everyday life. Say no when you mean no. Admit when you're tired. Accept help when it is offered. These gestures seem simple, but they are internal revolution. Because every time you allow yourself to be human, you teach your brain that love does not depend on perfection, but on presence. Research by the American Psychological Association has revealed that people who practice vulnerability regularly are 35% more likely to form healthy emotional connections and 28% less prone to depression. This shows something profound. Healing is not a solitary endeavor. The soul heals through contact, but it takes courage to allow yourself this contact after a lifetime of protecting yourself. And that courage is born in simple moments, when you decide that you will no longer repeat what hurt you. When, instead of running away from yourself, you sit with yourself. When, instead of waiting to be understood, you begin to understand yourself. And maybe that's why so many of us, now adults, are rediscovering what it means to trust. Because trusting is not surrendering to the other. It is reconnecting with what is true within yourself. A practical step that can change everything is conscious internal dialogue. During the day, notice the way you talk to yourself. How many times a day do you blame yourself, criticize yourself, compare yourself? Start replacing those words with phrases you would say to someone you love. It's okay to rest. You did the best you could. You deserve peace. It seems small, but the brain learns by repetition. And every repetition of love is a seed planted in soil that was once fear. Another powerful exercise is the emotional timeline. Take a sheet of paper and draw your life by decades. In each one, write down a moment when you felt you had to be too strong. Then, next to it, Write what that child or young person needed to hear. This helps transform memory into compassion, and compassion is the antidote to trauma. And if you want to take the next step, find a safe space to talk. A therapist, a support group, or even someone you trust. Isolation feeds suffering. Connection is what undoes it. But if none of that is possible right now, there is something that is already enough. The simple act of stopping blaming yourself. Because what happened was not your choice, it was your adaptation. And adaptation is intelligent, not failure. You may never have heard this before, but you deserve to hear it now. You no longer need to prove your worth. You don't need to be admired to be loved. You don't need to be in control to be safe. You just need to start treating yourself with the same care you've always offered others. And if there are days when the past weighs heavily, remember, the weight doesn't mean you're stuck. It means you're carrying something that's ready to be put down. Because no one was made to live in a state of war all the time. Peace is not a luxury. It's a biological right. Sociologist Charles Horton Cooley said that we become what we believe others see in us. And maybe now is the time to turn the mirror around, to stop living through the eyes of those who couldn't see you, and start seeing yourself as you really are, someone who has survived, grown, and can now choose to live with lightness. So here's a simple plan, not a recipe, but a real start. Recognize the pattern. Notice when you are trying to control, fix, or please. Just noticing is the beginning of change. Break the cycle. Take a step back before reacting. Breathe. Ask yourself, does this come from my fear or my truth? Rewrite the script. Instead of being the one who solves everything, allow yourself to be the one who feels, who makes mistakes, who asks for help. Create daily breaks, even if they are short. A quiet coffee, a walk with no purpose, a moment of presence. Celebrate the small things. Healing is not an event, it is an accumulation of moments, and every moment of truth is a victory. These steps are not theoretical, they are training for the heart. And every day you practice, something changes silently, as if your body, for the first time, believes it can let its guard down. You don't need to erase the pain to find peace. You just need to let it transform into wisdom. Because every scar, when accepted, becomes proof that self-love is stronger than any absence. And maybe that's why, deep down, every story of healing is a story of reunion, not with the past, but with the part of you that survived it. So, before you leave this video, take a deep breath. You've come this far because there's something inside you that still believes you can be light. And you can. If this content touched something inside you, leave your like. It helps YouTube deliver this video to more people who also need to hear it. If you want, share in the comments, even anonymously, what resonated most with your story. And if you feel you're ready to continue this journey of self-knowledge and healing, subscribe to the channel. Here, every week, we talk honestly about what the world hides, the silent pains that shape who we are, and the possible path back home.